But let's move into the next topic, and we are going to welcome on a special guest. I knew the moment that this trade went down that this guy was going to be on this segment. We're going to welcome in our patron, Jake. We're going to be having a special Jake segment next month, so definitely keep your eye out on that around the first or second week of March. But definitely keep an eye out on that. Jake, welcome back to the podcast, and we're talking about your 76ers making the trade for Tobias Harris, now having a starting lineup of Ben Simmons, J.J. Redick, Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid. First, talk about the reaction you had when you first realized that you guys were getting Tobias Harris.
Yeah, I was just talking to my friend playing PlayStation, and he told me, read the Wojnarowski's tweet, and I, didn't believe him. I kind of laughed. Then I went on and I read it myself, and I was like, holy shit, they're going for it. Elton Brand is giving up everything to go for it. And, I mean, I was super excited, and even watching the game last night, it was kind of crazy that the Sixers actually have, 5 good players instead of 3. And, I'm excited that they finally, the process kind of is now complete, I would say. All the assets are gone. The 4 stars we wanted are here, and even watching last night, they kind of even had 5 stars after J.J. Redick just exploded.
Yeah, seriously, the best player in that game was J.J.
He was shooting fire.
Yeah, I mean, Joe was sick, but looking at that game, I mean, J.J. Redick rose to the occasion. The full trade as Philly receives Tobias Harris, Boban, and Mike Scott, Toby, and Bobby are staying together.
You can't split up greatness.
And the Los Angeles Clippers receive Landry Shamet, Wilson Chandler, Mike Muscala, who's now a Laker, Philadelphia's 2020 first-round pick that is protected, Miami's 2021 first-round pick that's unprotected. They got that in the Zaire Smith and Mikal Bridges flip, and then Philadelphia's 2021 second-round pick and Philadelphia's 2023 second-round pick. Dave, the question that we are framing this as is, do the Sixers now have the second-best starting lineup? If you do want to make the argument they have the best over the Warriors, be my guest. I don't think anyone's that dumb on this podcast, but you can go out and say, do you think that they have the second-best starting lineup in the NBA?
They do have the second best starting lineup in the NBA. They have 4 all-stars. They've got an incredible wealth of talent out there. They pretty much went back and fixed the spacing issues they had by adding Tobias Harris on this team. He's a versatile wing who can run with the ball in his hands, out of his hands, doesn't matter. But that is vital because they just needed that. It was something that after moving Dario, they kind of lost out on. And obviously they've been sliding in rotational players, but it doesn't come close to the amount of talent that Tobias Harris brings to that team.
Yeah, I will say that Tobias Harris wasn't an all-star, but was a snub, kind of like Ben Simmons last year, losing it to Goran Dragic. But Ricky, do you think that you're at least agreeing with Dave, and I know Jake, that the Sixers now have the second best starting lineup in the NBA?
I mean, I want to say on paper, yes, they do. If you look at names on paper, yes, the 76ers should have the second best one. But I will say, it's not all about what's on paper. There is part of me that thinks oh, okay, if they went up against the Rockets could beat them in a 7-game series. They went up against Boston, although that series now becomes a little bit closer with Toby being on the team, but Boston still has a pretty good lineup. I feel like this is a question of yes, on paper they do have the second best lineup, but will this on paper lead to them doing anything once they get to the playoffs?
Yeah, I don't think I need to answer the question. I think, again, on paper, they probably do. I think I agree with you that Boston's probably third. If they did have Gordon Hayward fully healthy and Gordon Hayward fully consistent, I think Boston would have a great argument with Kyrie, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, and then Al Horford. Mostly, though, they've been running Marcus Morris, Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, Kyrie Irving, and Al Horford, and I would still take the Sixers over that one. But Jake, obviously, the starters are there, but a big problem that you've been bringing up to me on Twitter and just every time you've been on this podcast is the lack of depth that the Sixers have. They got rid of Fultz. They got rid of Muscala, who you were not a fan of. Do you think that they've done enough to not only address the starting lineup, but do you think they've also done enough to address the depth on this team with acquiring Mike Scott, acquiring Bobby, and also getting Jonathon Simmons in the Fultz trade?
Yeah, I think without question they're the second best starting lineup in the league. I think off the bench, they definitely did a good job getting the wings they needed. I still think they're missing a second ball handler off the bench. I know TJ, I love TJ, big fan of him, but relying on him to play big minutes in the playoffs is not going to be great, I would think. And I'm really hoping people get bought out. I really hope Jeremy Lin gets bought out from Atlanta because he would be absolutely perfect. And I was kind of hoping Wesley Matthews or Wayne Ellington would come here, but apparently they'd rather go to Detroit and Indiana. And
Get that playing time.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Boban off the bench fixes the need for the backup big man. And then we got the regional manager, Mike Scott, and James Ennis is just exactly what they needed. They need that player who's dirty 3-and-D and just doesn't need the ball in his hands off the bench, and he's perfect.
Yeah, quiet pickup in James Ennis. The one question I will go back to with would be the fact that Brett Brown did roll out Jimmy Butler as a point guard not too long ago. Do you think that that's a viable option if you're not able to get a guard in the buyout market?
Yeah, it's viable in the playoffs. I don't want him to have to play 40 minutes a game in the regular season like he did for Thibodeau back in the day. I don't think that's reliable for anybody to do long term. So I would like to get a second ball handler, but if they are forced to use Jimmy Butler in that role in the playoffs, then I think they'll be all right.
I think the biggest question now, Dave and Ricky, would just be the fact that we look at what happened last year in that Boston series, and Brett Brown was just such an Achilles heel to them winning that series, because you look at the talent, and they were in most of those games, especially the one in Philly, where, crazy shot thrown up by Bellinelli, I think.
Oh, my God.
To tie the game up and send it into overtime, and then just they weren't able to.
Should have won it, but that just did a little 3-point line.
Weren't able to execute an OT. Do you think that they now have the talent to possibly come over and overcome the shortcomings that Brett Brown does have as a coach, and the ones that we brought up on this podcast?
I think they do. The big contributor is really Jimmy Butler in all of this. He's someone who is known for being able to take over late in game, and he's proved that pretty much since he's been on this team. His instant transformation on this team was I think game 1 or 2 of him being here was him with a game winner. And it's just, he has that special factor when it comes down to the line. He's able to kind of guide these young kids through it, because he is someone who's played in playoff runs. I don't want to say deep because he hasn't made it to a championship, but he's played in playoff runs. He's got that experience about him. He's a little bit older than a lot of these guys. I think he is that X factor to help guide them, because Brett Brown may still have some lineup concerns and rotational issues. I know last year, there was the Ben Simmons conundrum of, well, Ben can't be on the floor, and then even when TJ was performing extremely well, they pulled him off because these are valuable minutes for Ben to have, and he's the better player, but he wasn't playing better that day. So I think that giving them that gluttony of top end talent will help fill in for their bench depth. But Brett Brown, oh man, he is just no. I'm gonna say Jimmy Butler counters it. No, Jimmy Butler will counter whatever mistakes or foibles he makes.
Ricky.
Brett Brown's the scapegoat. He's getting fired at the end of the year. That's what I think.
Even if they win a championship?
No. Well,
he's getting fired no matter what.
I don't think the Philadelphia is going to win a title. Even if they get to the finals, I think the Warriors, no matter who they play, would win. And against any team in the East, maybe the Bucks
Warriors
would be a team that could give them a run. Well, the Celtics would be interesting. We're going to get into that though. Yeah. But for me, it comes down to the rotations for Brett Brown, and I feel like Dave was saying, can this front end talent of hey, if our starters ball out, can that be enough to counteract? And I'm going to say no, because I feel like the two guys that I look at that are going to be most important, of course TJ will, but the additions is Boban and then Jonathon Simmons, where Jonathon Simmons is a guy who gave at least 20 minutes a night in Orlando. If he gets that same kind of average in Philly, what are you going to give at that 2, at that 3? But then also, Boban, what are you going to do when you're on the court, and will that be enough? But
Boban's the most predictable person in the NBA.
But the thing I don't believe in is I don't believe that Brett Brown is going to put them in the right situations to be successful. Where in the playoffs, we are criticizing Brett Brown's moves, and then Philly will make a move because they want to win a title with these players, and they're going to have to renegotiate with Toby if they want to keep him after this year. Yeah,
their plan is they want to keep all 4 players that they received, and if they're trading what they did to get Tobias Harris, they definitely better keep him. But Jake, talking about Brett Brown putting him in the right situations, what do you think this team and these 4 stars plus JJ Redick plus the bench depth that you've acquired, what do you think the right situations are for the Sixers to be successful and possibly leading into the next conversation to be the best team in the Eastern Conference?
Their bench just can't. The Sixers have a very big problem of deciding to blow 20-point leads in about half a quarter. Yeah. It always happens. It's either right before halftime or right at the end of the third quarter. They always do it. So if they could just not have to play Furkan Korkmaz or Amir Johnson in big minutes because they finally have bench pieces. I mean, I much rather would have gotten Terrence Ross and Jonathon Simmons from the Magic, but I guess they didn't try. But I just think if they could just find some consistency on the bench defensively, they'd be fine. The scoring isn't the issue. That starting lineup's going to give you a lot of points, and especially if J.J. Redick's going to keep going like he was last night.
Just say 100 points.
Yeah, 100 points. Literally, we got the James Bond villain, Boban. We got James Ennethina would hit threes, and Mike Scott. I don't know exactly what to expect of him, but as long as they can bring us like consistency defensively, that's all they need.
Well, I think one thing too is hopefully Mike Scott can bring you some shooting because he is a guy who can stretch the floor a little bit, and hopefully he can be similar level to Muscala because I know Muscala wasn't great and you weren't a huge fan of him, but
I don't like
Muscala was required to play more minutes than I think Mike Scott will be. So if he's doing the same thing in less amount of minutes, I think it'll be something that's a little bit more palatable for the 76ers. Final question that I have for you guys is how does Tobias Harris kind of help this team? Is there any way that Tobias Harris hurts this team? Personally, I think it's a great addition because, Dave, you brought up a little bit about Jimmy Butler's playoff experience. Obviously, Joe and Ben had their playoff experience last year. The thing that Toby doesn't have is playoff experience. But to bring a little bit of baseball in here, I've been researching some things, and everybody kind of remembers, if you're a baseball fan, you remember Daniel Murphy's crazy run of in his first 9 playoff games, he had 7 home runs. Yeah. And I was looking up things. There was a guy who actually beat that. It was Carlos Beltran. He had 8 home runs in his first 9 games. And I didn't even know about that. I just found it through a little bit of research. The thing that they did have in common, though, was they didn't make it to the playoffs until year 7 of their career. Right now, Tobias Harris is a 7-year veteran. He's a guy that is, gotten a ton of playing time. He's played over 500 games in his career. He's gone every single place probably imaginable. He's gone in Milwaukee to start his career, Orlando, went to Detroit, and then to the Western Conference in the Clippers, and then now back to Philadelphia. He knows the Eastern Conference. He knows what it's like. He's very acclimated to this game. He's a guy with low usage that can put up great numbers, with putting up 20 points per game with a very low usage in Los Angeles. I think this was a fantastic addition. I know some people are worried about the 2021 Miami pick, but also it's Pat Riley out there. Pat Riley's not going to throw out a stinker of a team.
He's going to continue to overpay for mid-range guys.
Exactly, and they're going to be a fine team that makes the playoffs every single year. So, you might have lost a pick that's around 14 to 15. When was the last time Miami was this bad that they had a top pick? I think their best pick recently was Justice Winslow at 10, and then Dwayne Wade very long ago, and that was before Pat Riley even got there, I believe.
True.
So I think that Tobias was a fantastic pickup. But is there any way that they hurt him, or is it only a positive for Tobias Harris in the pickup room?
The thing that I think, and I'll just jump in really quick before Jake is...
Jake can finish it off, it's fine.
I feel like the biggest thing for Toby is he's not ahead. He's not an ego in the room. Where you've got Joe, you've got Jimmy, you've got Ben, they're kind of like your big 3. Toby's a J.J. Redick kind of guy in my mind, where, yes, he's not as old as J.J., with being 26, Toby's going to come in and be the consummate veteran of I'm going to come in, I'm going to know my role, I'm going to find where I fit on this team, and then I'm going to fit into that role and do what I have to do to win. He's not going to be a guy that comes in and says, this is my team, or creates problems, and that is one of the best things that this does for the Sixers is, yes, he's going to help you on the court because he's a good basketball player, but also he's going to meld in, and whatever you role that he feels like he'll fit in, or whatever role you want to put him in, he's going to do that role because he wants to help the team win, and he's just going to be a good veteran for the Sixers.
Yeah, I think you nailed it when you said, he's a low-usage guy, but he can really excel in that role. He will let the game come to him, and that's one of the most impressive things about the Sixers team is when you have a ball handler, especially as Ben Simmons, he's able to create mismatches and draw a lot of attention to himself driving the lane because of his limited skill set offensively, which means that if guys really key on him driving in, he can pull defenses in and set up better shots for players like Tobias Harris, who has absolutely no problem pulling the trigger on the outside. He's
shooting
a great shooter.
66% in just one game with the
Philly. It's one game.
Yeah. I know it's one game.
Small sample sizes.
He was 2 of 3. He took 3 threes.
If he keeps up and has better than the
that would be a
42
record.
than he has, then he's going to be fine.
42 is amazing already. That's oh my god. They're thankful to have a 4 out there who can do that. But again, he can play small, he can play big. And I think he allows them to get in some really great matchups because he can switch on guys. He's not known for being a massively above average defender, but he can at least hold his own, which is something you need when you're going up against those other teams who are so wing heavy.
Jake, before we get into the best team in the Eastern Conference discussion, final question I have for you. I'm going to change it up a little bit. I don't think you see any negatives in this Tobias Harris trade, right?
No.
Okay. So what I want to ask then is, with this team, and we kind of alluded to this to you, what would be better for the 76ers? Well, let me phrase it this way. At what point after making this trade in the playoffs does Brett Brown need to go to keep his job?
That's okay.
Well, no, because we talked about that, and I didn't hear your opinion.
Yeah. I would say Eastern Conference Finals at least. I think this team, like we'll hear later, is the best team in the East, and I think that they have the talent to go all the way. And they could lose in the second round, but if it's not blatantly his fault, I still don't think he gets fired. I just think, first of all, we had to see how the team gels. Obviously, the first game was good, but we saw that with Jimmy too. It was good, and then we went through rough patches. So we got to get past this honeymoon phase, and then we'll see, and then we can set realistic expectations for the team.
And then the final thing would be, if you're able to re-sign Tobias Harris, but Jimmy Butler walks, are you going to feel slighted about that? Because, although you're not going to have 4 stars, you're still going to have 3 stars next year. So, I mean, will it seem as a loss if you're not able to sign all 4 guys next year? As long as you're able to keep 3, will you be happy as a 76er fan?
I'd be disappointed, but I really, honestly, with how Jimmy's played down the stretch, yesterday he was great. He was fantastic. 14 and 14 from the free throw line. He's awesome. But before that, I'm really hesitant to give him the 5-year deal because he's been pretty crappy offensively, and defensively he's always there, but he kind of seemed like lackluster, like not focused the last couple of weeks. Maybe with this trade he's like re-engaged, but we'll see down the stretch. I think getting Tobias Harris is almost a look at Jimmy going, if you don't re-sign, we still got this guy, and we're still a top team in the East. So if Jimmy truly wants to win, then he'd stay, but we'll see his true personality or demeanor if he doesn't stay.